Have you ever wondered what the watercolour ratio water to paint is all about? You may have heard of the watercolour clock. If you haven't, I'm just going to do a really simple version using ultramarine blue. If you haven't got any ultramarine in a tube, just use your violety blue in your pan, wake it up with a few drops of water before you start, so that it's easy to get it out of the pan. So watercolour, it's very important that you add water. People talk about all sorts of complicated ratios. What do they mean? Well, it is fairly simple. I'm going to do you a very simple clock. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of my blue pigment, mix it into a puddle of water until I think I've got a nice colour to put on my paper. My first watercolour ratio of paint to water is tea consistency. And tea, if you make any tea, you should be able to see through it. So if you put your tea in this palette, you would be able to see through it. So I'm dragging it around a little bit. Obviously, and there's in places where it's not that see-through, but if you move it around, you will see underneath it. On here, I've got slightly damp paper, and I'm just going to put on this first wash of ultramarine blue in a tea consistency, which gives a very nice, lovely wash, the sort of wash you'd hope to get if you're doing skies, etc. Just dampen down the next one, which I've termed coffee. Now, you don't have to think of them in the same way at all. You just have to think of something that works for you. So if I have coffee, I add milk to it. So although the coffee on its own would be see-through, by adding milk, we get a slightly different feel to our drink, which is not quite so see-through. So let's see if I can emulate that. Now I've just added more to the puddle I originally had. If your original puddle has run out, you just start a new one. But this time you have more pigment to water than you had before, until you think it's more like a coffee spread out on your palette. It's hard to visualize this if your idea of coffee tea is different to mine, so please pick something that you think is going to work for you. So I'm now dropping this one next to the original one, which was, as we remember, the analogy was clear tea, no milk in it. I'm going to pop that on. The paper's damp, so it's helping to spread it out. It's feeling a bit too rich. If I was painting with this, I'd think, oh no, my sky's a bit dark. Have I got too much? I might be inclined to add more water. Is that what you would do? Now we'll let that one dry. Just dampen this, and some of it's just jumped over, but I'm not too worried about that. So we've gone from tea to coffee. Now this one says cream. So all I'm going to do is add more pigment from my tube to my puddle. So it's richer. And for those of you who use cream, there's all sorts of creams. In the UK we have single and double whipped and all those things. Elsewhere I've heard of heavy cream, all sorts of different ways of describing it. Now, some watercolour clocks go into all that detail. Let's keep this simple. What would cream look like to you if it was paint? Well, it doesn't move quite so easily as coffee, does it? Coffee is going to run around the place. It's much more opaque, so if it sits quietly in one area, I can't see through that at all. It's thicker, but we can still make a puddle out of it. Let's pop a little bit more water in. So there's my puddle. So I'm going to go with that as cream. Just need to wait till my damp part of the paper is slightly dried or drying. So this is dry enough for me to try my cream on. So we're putting this onto damp paper, and as it goes on, you may or may not notice whether it's thicker or more rich than the layer you put on the previous area. I'm trying to keep them separate so we don't have a huge run back into the drying wash before, and I know that a lot of you will have had that happen and wondered why it is that happens. When you add wet paint to a drying wash, it will push back into the dry areas and cause those blooms, which sometimes are what you want, but sometimes they're not. So control it by not adding watery paint into a drying wash. Every time you add a layer of paint to your watercolour, make it richer and thicker than the one before. So tea to coffee to cream. Last area, I've written honey because I think most of us know what honey is. I tend to call this one Marmite. You love it or you hate it. Vegemite if you're Australian. Don't know what you have in the States. Going back to my tube of paint, because my previous blob I put out is very wet, so I'm going to squeeze out my tube. If you don't have tube paint, you just need to get enough water, just enough water to rub onto your pan paint so that you're getting it as thick as you can all over your brush. Test it out, it shouldn't run anywhere. This is the honey stage. I have not dampened the paper, but you can do, of course it will run if you do that. So let's try half of this. So why would you use this phase? Well, straight away you can see you can get a very, very rich colour. You can also get a beautiful dry brush technique if you'd like a dry brush technique. It's the thickest paint you can get on there. I'm just brushing it away gently down so don't run into that area. And of course you can go back over it, layer it up. There's a little bit of dampness in my brush there, you could probably see that. But the paper is picking up the texture of this thick paint. It's very dark. So you could use this for details, layering over the top of your paler washes. Just for interest, what would happen if you layer it over a damp wash? So let's pop in a little bit of dampness with some plain water around the end here. I haven't put too much in. So I'm now going to paint with my sticky paint into this. I'm going to use the point and use just some random lines. Twist my brush as I go, make sure I load it up again. So you can get some really nice patterns, lines. These would be good for trees. But because you've got damp paper or a damp wash of colour, then you get this soft blurring of these lines. And if you prefer, you wait for it to dry and you go back in with a very set, hard-edged line. So honey or Marmite or whatever you want to call it gives you the ability to do very strong marks, but you could argue it's not particularly watercolourish. You're almost going towards gouache, acrylics, that sort of style of painting. Lots of people do use watercolours just like this. They just pick them up straight out of the tube and paint with them. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to decide how you want to use them. In my experience, when you're learning, most people automatically put tea on their paintings. They put tea first, second, third layer. They never go beyond the tea stage, which gives you richer, darker colours. So of course, if you were doing the sky, tea works really well. As it's drying, if you wanted to add some depth to the clouds or add another colour in, if you put the same consistency with the same water, you'll just get blooms. If you add slightly thicker paint, it will push into that damp paper with that colour and make some nice effects for you. That is a very, very simple watercolour clock. Believe me, there are many that go all sorts. You've got right the way around, cream comes at least 3 times. Find one that works for you. Obviously, if you use yellow, it's going to be harder to see the differences, but you can work out whether you can see through it or not and pick it up straight from the tube. We'll have a look at blooms and how you may or may not wish to have them next time. If you've got any questions, please do ask. Thanks for watching. See you all on the next video. Bye for now.